A couple of questions that I believe are relevant for a sales, primarily role interview at Microsoft. Some of them are also for marketing roles. But I found this list to be an interesting one, also from what I believe gets asked, as well as from I find super interesting for you to prepare. Number 24 here, we have what books are you reading and what are they about? Right, so I'll let you decide as to why they ask you this question. And by the way, you could use a star format as well if you wanted to. Number 23, share a time when you need to deliver bad news to your board. How did you do it? How was it received? So this is more of for a sales executive role here. Number 22, give me an example of a time when you need to provide difficult but honest feedback to a friend or colleague. So this is for a manager level role here, but this is something I believe you should definitely prepare for in an intense interview, as it is expected for these types of roles. Number 21, how do you establish trust? Which tactics have worked for you and which ones don't? So needless to say, trust is a very important, significant aspect. Also, for the previous question, how do you deliver feedback to someone, or how do you take feedback from someone? Trust is an essential, a key component of a successful candidate in general. So that's why I believe that the better you establish the trust, or the better you communicate trust, the better the outcome will be. Number 20 here, tell me about an opportunity you lost and why did you lose it? So here we get into failure territory, and if you want to be good at behavior interviewing, you need to prepare failures. You need to become good at communicating failures. I have a couple of other videos where I explain these failures, but in short, using the STAR method, you should focus basically on a quantifiable failure, a proper failure, and half of the time should be spent on your learnings from that failure. Number 19, when a customer was upset with you in the past, how did you handle it? It's not necessarily a failure, so I wouldn't necessarily go with a failure, especially for a more junior role, but still it's handling stressful situations and of course about trust to a certain extent here. Number 18, why did you choose to work in sales over another customer facing role? So I found this one is particularly interesting for salespeople. Number 17, a time when you took a risk unsuccessfully. So this is another failure story, but again, a risk failure, a risk-based scenario here. And keep in mind here, talking about risk, in my opinion, for these jobs interview, you are actually a risk. So better you mitigate the risk to a certain extent, the better the outcome will be with these things. Number 16, this is describe a sales success story. So this should be music for most of you, but of course, you should prepare it. Number 15, describe a time when your prospect said no. So a time when you were refused on something. I believe it's an interesting exercise to find the best possible example here. Number 14, how do you overcome a disagreement with your manager? You must have heard it a couple of times by now, but it's linked with trust always, but also to a certain extent backbone if you want. This is also a great opportunity to exhibit this. Number 13, what would you do if your team members didn't like your idea? So how do you sell your idea to team members that are not really a fan of that idea? Number 12, the time your manager gave you feedback and how did you deal with the situation? So time you received negative feedback from a manager, how do you handle that? Number 11, this is a more classic one. Why are you leaving your previous company? So this is something I know many of you are questioning, hey, how do I go about answering this? But I believe that each case is particular, and I won't get into detail as to how do you go about answering it. But yes, you should prepare it, and it gets asked quite often if you ask me. Number 10, what's your biggest weakness? So at the same time as you prepare your strength, because as a good salespeople, you should sell yourself on your strength. You should also keep in mind to find a couple of weaknesses. Some people prefer to have a list of 2 or 3 weaknesses. Some people prefer one and good. But I would also always keep in mind to have a backup to a certain extent, because they might not like the first, or you should have a backup as well. Number 9, how has your marketing influenced outcomes? So this is for marketing roles, and this is particularly efficient for marketing roles because there, measuring outcomes is a challenge. What is your opinion about change, and have you had some experience changing? So everyone knows change is hard, and these high-performing employers promote change internally quite often, and you're going to experience change at some point in time here. So having previously experienced change and having been capable to adapt to change in particular is, I believe, something very valuable, especially during these times. So I firmly believe that people who adapt the best will be the winners here. Number 7, tell me about the time when you had multiple competing priorities and how did you handle this? How do you prioritize, essentially? Number 6, tell me about the time when you had a conflict in your team. So it's again about conflict, about trust, earnings, people's trust. How do you sell? How do you convince people of things? Number 5, this is a Microsoft specific one. What's your favorite product and how would you market or sell it? So it could be a Microsoft product if you want, but what's your favorite product? So again, something you should keep in mind that it might also develop the conversation further from here. And number 4, how would you approach a difficult or an ambiguous problem? I know this is again one of the more commonly asked questions in behavioral interviews and behavioral interviews with people, with candidates from whom the expectations are high. And to give you a little pointer here, try to always link to metrics if at all possible. Try to bring clarity if you want to the table. Try to sell yourself as someone who's able to successfully navigate through ambiguous situations. Number 3, again, a very Microsoft specific type of question. How would you describe, let's say, cloud computing to a 6-year-old? So again, they are interested in your ability to generate clarity in the conversation. Same with the ambiguous situation. They're on the same note. It could also be as simple as, it could also be framed slightly differently as how would you explain internet or how would you explain calculus to someone who doesn't know about these things. But you should prepare on what you believe will be the focus areas in your interview and be able to communicate those in a way that promotes clarity in that conversation. And finally, the last 2 questions. The second one is walk me through your resume. So needless to say, tell me about yourself. This is it should go without saying that this is one of the crucial ones that you want to prepare because that's often the starting point of the conversation. And the first one is, why are you interested in Microsoft? Why Microsoft? Which I've done a video about just recently. So this would be the question that I found the most relevant, especially when it comes to sales roles. I've seen a couple of notes for manager, for sales executive, and even for one specific to marketing roles. But I believe this is a list that you might want to consider going into an intense, primarily behavioral interview with Microsoft. So hopefully you found this useful.